they want to see that people are committed to seeing it grow, that they're not just going to get it on the shelf and then they never see them again. So they kind of want to say, if we do this, what's your plan? What's your plan to help it succeed in the market? Our assumption has always been, standing out with a label or, a novel marketing ploy is going to be really difficult in this consumer packaged goods space because there's a lot of good marketing that's doing that. Really, our claim to fame is our taste and our taste profile. So our strategy was really around how do we get people to taste it? Do we do that through price? Do we do that through tasting promotions? Do we do that through, marketing and advertising? And really, we landed more on the tastings. So we would do in-person demos and tastings in store. And really, that's actually how we would drive a lot of our new customer acquisition once we actually got on the shelves.
Welcome back to Over a Pint, the podcast that focuses on the fast-paced world of marketing. We got a good one today. Before I get into who we are talking to and what we are talking about, let me introduce you to my co-host, the VP over at Celtic, an award-winning full-service agency located in Milwaukee's historic Third Ward, Mr. Kurt Lingle. How you doing, Kurt?
Greetings. I'm doing fantastic, Pat.
Awesome. Today, we're talking to the Hein family, or a big portion of them, and we're talking about the salsa business. They've got a business. We're going to be diving into how they started it, what they've got going on. This is going to be a little bit about how they built that, but it's kind of a work in progress. So they're going to be talking about the things they've encountered, things that have been working, some things that haven't worked, where they're going. This is going to be a fun one. Welcome, Marc Hein, leader of the troop, and the rest of the Hein family. How you guys doing?
Good. Thanks, Patrick.
Cool. We got, I'm glad you're here, guys. Before we start, it's called Over a Pint for a reason. Beside me, who's got a beer they want to promote?
Jeremy.
I have a beer.
Jeremy, what do you got?
This is the Peach Stand Rambler. It's from Odell Brewing, so not necessarily a local beer. They're pretty big, but they are based out of Fort Collins, and they are my favorite brewery
too, Jeremy. That's always a good brewery.
They have a lot of good stuff. There's actually a tap room 2 blocks away from my house.
Oh, love it, love it.
Who else has got anything they want to promote?
Well, I can't get it, but my favorite is still New Glarus's Spotted Cow. Always. So whenever I get up to Wisconsin, that's what I usually try and find.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Mr. Lingle, come on, what do you got?
Well, Pat, I'll bring something, but this isn't local either, so I make no apologies for that. But it's a good one. It's Modelo. It's their. We had these folks on the podcast last year. Fascinating conversation. Check that conversation out if you want. But it is a good beer too. Love it. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. And today I'm packing. What am I going with? I'm going with the Hazy Rabbit India Pale Ale from Lakefront Brewery. Kurt, you're very familiar with Lakefront. They've got great stuff. This is a good one.
Good beer.
Yeah. Marc, why don't we start with you? Why don't you introduce who's here? Kind of set the table for with our listeners who we all have here and their role kind of in the Hein empire, and then we'll get into this.
All right. So, and we don't have titles, so I'll put it that way. Everybody's kind of an equal partner at this point, but we all have skill sets that match up really nice. So I'm Marc, obviously. I'm really kind of the guy who's been mixing things and putting things in containers and putting labels on them for my entire career. Hasn't always been salsa, right? But I've really been in the manufacturing, product development, product commercialization space my entire career. And so this fits in very nicely with that. Richard is my youngest brother. He has agreed to do all of our social media for now for us, and so he's helping us out that way. Jeremy is actually the impetus behind getting this thing started, and he can tell you about what prompted that. But he takes care of all the finance and all of the IT aspects of the business. He's got many years of buying and selling businesses under his belt, and then he's recently finished his computer engineering degree. So that's why he gets to cover those two things. And then Jason is my oldest son, and he does all of the sales and marketing for us, and has quite a bit of background in technology, new product development, product strategy, and can sell just about anything to anybody. So he's pretty good at it.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being on the podcast. The product is salsa. So, Jeremy, Marc kind of set you up. Since you were the linchpin on this. Give us a little bit of background about the salsa and how it came to be that you go from, hey, we've got a family recipe, which is cool. A lot of us have got family recipes. But what was the tipping point that said, okay, guys, I'm serious. Let's start looking into taking this to the next level. Talk to us about that.
It's a good question. I was making the salsa at home pretty frequently for my friends and my coworkers. And like you said, it's a family recipe. We grew up with it in the house and in our kitchens. And it got to a point where I just had a lot of friends that were asking me for it on a regular basis. And I was in my second bachelor degree for computer science, and I wasn't doing an internship. It was in the middle of COVID. And I decided I was just going to build the website as somewhat of a school project. And so if people wanted to order it, they could order it. If they didn't, great. But it was a way for me to develop my computer science skills that I was in school for. And so that's really how it started. Turns out the FDA doesn't like it if you just make food products at home and sell them to people. So, I talked to a few friends who are lawyers, and they kind of notified me of that. And I wasn't really going to do anything with it, but I was talking to my dad about it, and he basically said, well, let me figure out how to do the manufacturing. You set up the rest of it. And that's sort of how we got started.
And now, how long ago was this again, Jeremy, when you had that conversation?
So this would have been in the summer of 2020, and we officially launched the website for online sales in October of 2020.
Okay. So just because I'm curious about this, and I want to just probe on this a little bit. What does it take to make salsa? Like how complicated is this recipe?
There's probably about 13 to 15 ingredients in it.
Okay.
Okay. So it depends on what you call complicated. The way we want to make it can be a little complicated because we want to make it as close to the way as we would in our own kitchen, right? So I want to use whole tomatoes and whole green peppers and onions and, things that have to be cleaned and cut and chopped, and large scale manufacturing is not always set up well for that, at least not for small people like we are, right?
Right.
So that makes it a little complicated, but at the end of the day, it's a recipe. It goes in a kettle. It gets cooked for about an hour, hour and a half, and it gets bottled. And we do it almost the same way we would do it in the kitchen, just with a little bit bigger pieces of equipment.
So, Marc, talk to us about how did you go? Talk to us about that just next step. I mean, Jeremy's cooking this in his kitchen, but now you're taking it to the next level, which is, I'm just going to call it small batch. That may not be the technical term for it, but I mean, what are you looking for? Like, I wouldn't even know where to begin with this. Like, where do you Google like places that make salsa? I mean, how would you? What was the next step?
Yeah. So part of that is the benefit of the three of us have unique backgrounds in each one of these spaces, right? So I've been doing, like I told you, a lot of the products I've developed have had to be toll manufactured on an outside facility from the company that I worked at because they didn't have the equipment that they needed. So this was kind of a natural step for me to go, because to your point, I knew I needed a co-packer. They're not called tollers in the food industry; they're called co-packers. And I knew I had to find somebody. So I got online and said, okay, who's in Houston who does co-packing? And kind of went down the list of 15 or 20 people. The biggest challenge with small scale production is nobody wants to do small scale production.
Okay.
Right. So a lot of the co-packers that are out there, I had one guy tell me his minimum order quantity was 2 million jars. Well, I can't do 2 million jars, right? I need 200 jars.
Right.
And so finding somebody who has the right scale to do what you want it to do, that took a little bit of time, but I found somebody pretty quickly. And I called him up and I said, I'm interested in doing this. Can I come down and see your facility? And went and met with him, signed all the NDAs, ran test batches, right? Went through the process, made sure it tasted fine. And it took us from the time Jeremy and I talked in midsummer so I had product made before we went launch in October for online sales.
Well, and how many different recipes at that point, Mark, were you producing? 2. Okay. And so you find somebody who's going to manufacture this for you. I'm sure you already have you have a supply chain of different products, right? What's the quality kind of control like? I mean,
the quality control's at the production site.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So the other thing I needed, right, I wasn't in a position where I was going to go buy glass and buy tomatoes and buy green peppers. It would have been too much work. So he sources all the materials, right? And he makes salsa for himself and he makes salsa for other people. And right, they make a whole bunch of different products. So he's got the volume to help on the cost side also. And so you work with the co-packer to here's what I want. Here's the jars I want. Here are the lids I want. I didn't get everything I wanted.
Right.
But we found something that was okay. We figured out what we needed for labels, and I had a friend, always have a guy, right? Always got to have a guy. Had a friend who knew a guy in town who prints labels, and so he put me in touch with him, and I called him up, and sure enough, we had labels in a couple of weeks. And
Pat, if I could just, I got to ask the entire team here, because it's just, I'm listening to the story, and we're talking about this. Let's go back to 2020. Well, that's not too long ago.
Nope.
And all of a sudden, this business, this story is born organically. Not that you didn't have a business plan, but it's just how this all started just to happen, whether it was from opportunity from Jeremy, from your kitchen, and Mark and Jason and everyone bringing different backgrounds. I'm just kind of blown away how this thing just started and how you put this together. And I guess where I'm going with this is, did you know when you started this a couple of years ago, was there a vision or a want at that time? Like, this is our want, or is it just kind of like, you know what? Let's just figure this out as we go. I don't have the future that far mapped out. I'm just kind of curious. It's fascinating.
We had baby steps.
Everybody at home, the Hein family is just smiling, shaking their head like, no, there wasn't.
There were baby steps, right? Like, I vividly remember going, my dad makes it sound, it's just, go and find a co-packer and getting stuff. But I remember there were a couple stumbles along the way, right? Like, there were a couple batches that didn't quite taste quite right, because he used a different type of tomato than the fresh tomatoes that we used. And so it was too sweet, or it didn't have enough flavor, or it was chalky and pasty. So what was it? It was 1 or 2 batches that we scrapped because it wasn't right.
So I mean, but maybe that's me just simplifying things, but that's to me, that's new product startup, right? And Richard can talk to that. I mean, you always have those kinds of hiccups when you start teaching somebody how to make a product.
But it speaks to the quality control, right? So we really had to take a lot of time testing it against what we knew as a standard, right? Which was our own fresh, homemade, small batch on the stovetop kitchen made salsa. And so we would taste every single batch against that. And back to your point, Kurt, on small steps, we really first said, you know what, if we can make it so that we can provide it to our friends and family across the country and not lose money, we're fine. And that was the first step, right?
And we were planning on doing all online sales. We didn't plan on going past online sales.
Yeah.
That changed pretty quickly.
And then since then, we've expanded and we've gotten into a few grocery stores and, a couple food markets and a liquor market. But yeah, it all started out baby steps. And to your point, there wasn't a business plan when we first started. It was really just how do we share this recipe with our family and friends? That was really the first part.
So we're gonna keep parsing this down. So Jeremy, you're making this stuff and you're giving it to your friends and they're like, hey, God bless, thank you. This is awesome. Right? You go to the next level now. Now you're starting to manufacture this stuff. Jason, to your point, it's like we want to start selling this stuff, right? And not lose any money. Who are the first people that are buying this from you? Is it still friends and family?
Friends and family.
Got it. So they're giving you money for this thing now. All right. So, and you're just selling it off the website, right? Okay. At what point now, guys, do you cross the Rubicon and go, hey, what about stores?
Pretty quick.
Where does that happen?
So that happened, at least for me, because what would happen is we'd ship a few cases of salsa up to my house in Minneapolis, and we would have enough demand where, I was delivering salsa by hand to friends that were locally here. Because when you're buying a jar of salsa online for $7 and you're paying $15 in shipping,
yep,
that doesn't go too well, right? So we set up kind of a local delivery service, if you will, and that became, I'd say we got a lot of traction in the Twin Cities and in the La Crosse area where we have a lot of family connections and ties, and I think. What was it? It was like 80% of our sales ended up being kind of in the Twin Cities and Wisconsin area.
Yep.
And so at that point, we made a decision to say, okay, we can't keep hand delivering salsa and scale. So how do we get to where somebody's going to carry inventory and people can just go to it on their own and it becomes scalable for us. Meanwhile, I think we're all holding full-time jobs for the most part at the time. And so that was really the next step is we can't scale it individually. How do we get help on getting it to the masses? And that was really the inflection point for going to grocery partners.
If I can just add a little bit of that. So the other thing that became pretty obvious is we had kind of reached the limit on online sales for a food product, right? So I think people don't tend to buy food products, particularly ones they have to pay $15 to ship across country, unless they get a chance to taste it, right? So that works when you're local and you can get it to your friends, but when it gets past that friends and neighbors network, things really slowed down significantly. And the other piece underlying it is you realize that if you want to grow the business, you've got to scale. You have to get some scale because you can't get the cost out on the production side and get to a price point that's going to make any sense for a larger volume if you can't grow. And so we kind of got to that. We can sell about 200 jars a month through online sales, and then it just kind of comes to a stop. And we had a lot of friends pushing it, a lot of friends promoting it, a lot of friends sending samples to people. I got really good friends here who have family in Louisiana, and they would buy a case and take it to Louisiana. But if they didn't take it to Louisiana, they weren't going to buy it online, right? So we just kind of ran into that wall of growth, and you had to do something different.
Question for the Hein family. This goes out to all of you. So you're at a point where you make the decision because it's time. We have to look to the grocery industry, whatever, big, small, whatever. I know enough of the industry to be dangerous. I know it's very hyper competitive amongst each other, but also very competitive within. We had the president and CEO of Sendix on this year, and it was a fascinating conversation. So to all of you then, as you then are going around this, turning the chapter on the business, this next phase, how much did you know about the grocery industry, and what kind of animal did that look like as you're starting to forward? Because it's not as easy as like, let's go in. I mean, talk to us about that wild, wild west and what you encountered.
We thought it was that easy.
So the short answer is none of us know anything about the grocery store market. Okay. In fact, we were actually, I'll be honest, I think we were trying to avoid going to the grocery store market because we just didn't feel we were going to get the price and the margin that we were going to need. And that's still a challenge, right? How do you at least not lose money in that channel and still grow? But at the end of the day, when you get it, okay, what can the three of us do? How, because a lot of what drives our decisions is we want to grow, we want to keep growing, but there's only so much the three of us can do unless we're going to quit our jobs and go do salsa 100% of the time. And so that kind of drove us to, okay, what's our profile customer look like? Who are the types of grocery stores that serve those kinds of customers? Where do we have them, right? Because we talked about, well, maybe we try and grow in Texas because we're making them. But the reality is the grocery store profile in Texas doesn't fit the type of store that we think we can serve well. There are no small Kowalskis and Lunds and Byerlys in Texas. They're Kroger's and H-E-B's, and they're the big grocery store chains. And we're not ready to work with somebody like that.
And there's thousands of salsas available on those shelves in Texas.
Right. Jason, you've been deemed the sales and marketing guy. So I got to ask you this. I mean, this is a follow-up on Kurt's thing. It's like you go into one of these stores, even in the Twin Cities, smaller type of place. I mean, there's thousands of salsas. What's your pitch? So really, we know that we play in a premium market. We have the flavor profile, we have the quality of the product, and the uniqueness of the product behind it. And everybody that tastes is like, wow, this is different, right? So we felt really confident in the product that we had. We knew the segment of the market that we wanted to play in with the price point that we had. And so there's a couple grocery stores in the Twin Cities, a couple grocery store chains in the Twin Cities that, we know the type of people that shop in those grocery stores are really going to be our target audience. So those were the ones that we targeted. I classic sales 101. I cold called and I cold emailed and went into a couple stores, asked for the store managers, asked who helps get product on the shelf. Is it you? Is it a central buyer? Is it, category manager? And most of the time people were willing to help and willing to network and make those connections. Then I would go in, and a lot of times the product would speak for itself. It would be, can I bring samples? Let's have a salsa and chips and just hang out and talk. You're right.
But really it was, it was always exploring from, what does it take to make a product work in your store? How do you get on the shelf? What do you look for in a product? What do you look for in a company? What are the expectations you have for a new product entering your shelf? So the conversation really wasn't, hey, how do I sell you my product? It was, how do you help new products grow? And what do you expect from new product suppliers in order to facilitate that growth? That was the conversation.
I love the conversation, and you definitely are a sales guy because that's the exact way to position that. So what did you learn, Jason?
Well, they really like brands that, well, one, you have to have a good product. had one category manager basically say, "I'll tell you to your face if it sucks." So that was, he didn't say that, by the way.
We haven't had anybody say that. So
that's true.
The grocery store chain.
But it was really about, they want to see passion behind the brand. They want to see that people are committed to seeing it grow, that they're not just going to get it on the shelf and then they never see them again. So they kind of want to say, if we do this, what's your plan? What's your plan to help it succeed in the market? Our assumption has always been, standing out with a label or, a novel marketing ploy is going to be really difficult in this consumer packaged goods space because there's a lot of good marketing that's doing that. Really, our claim to fame is our taste and our taste profile. So our strategy was really around how do we get people to taste it? Do we do that through price? Do we do that through tasting promotions? Do we do that through, marketing and advertising? And really, we landed more on the tastings. So we would do in-person demos and tastings in store. And really, that's actually how we would drive a lot of our new customer acquisition once we actually got on the shelves.
Who handled the in-store deck? Was that something that you would work through the store, or is that something where it was so grassroots that at times?
So I did most of them. We've actually not had a store. We've actually not paid a store to do a demo for us as of now. So I started doing most of them when we first got into Kowalski's. When we got into Lunds and Byerly's, the three of us, hit 6 stores in a weekend, 9 stores in a weekend. And then we have another one coming up in mid-September. That's going to be another 6 stores that Mark and I are going to be doing in the Twin Cities.
And if I could ask too, with the industry, and I think I might know where this is going, you might have alluded to this, but from a competitive perspective, I mean, how competitive are we talking? I mean, I envision when I walk into my local, whether it's a local Sendix, and I can kind of envision the options that are available to me when it comes to salsa. But walk us through. I mean, what kind of frontier did you walk into? Was this one where it was like that? There's opportunity, or is it no? We're talking pretty competitive. Just paint the picture a little bit.
Let me give you a little bit of stats.
Okay.
There are 1,800 new salsas in this country launched every year. 1,800 new ones, not considering all the ones that are already on the shelf. When you go to the shelf in Houston, it is almost a half an aisle of salsas. 7, 8 layers deep, right? 3 or 4 jars wide. It's not nearly as that competitive in the stores that we're at in Minneapolis, but there's still a lot, right? Jason, you can talk to Lunds and Byerly's and Kowalski's better.
Yeah, I mean, Kowalski's has at least 7 or 8 brands on the shelf, and then each brand has at least 2 or 3, sometimes 5 flavors. There's some brands that are just naturally entrenched in the market. Kurt's Special Recipe is one in the Minneapolis area that is a 40-year-old brand that was good family friends with the Kowalskis, and so they've been in the market as a family brand for 30, 40 years. So really, you do have a lot of entrenched loyalty to some of these local brands, and trying to break into it has been really a challenge. In Lunds and Byerly's, it's a little bit more. So they have more of the big name brands like Pace and Mrs. Renfro's and a few others. So it's even more competitive, both on price and on brand recognition in the larger grocery chains.
So,
and then you fight all of the other things as far as shelf placement and promotions and everything else. So it's really hard to be a new brand sitting on the bottom shelf in the corner, right, where nobody's ever looking for you. And how do you get people's attention that way?
Yep.
So that brings us up to the marketing guys. You guys seem like you're at a point where things are scaling. They're moving in the right direction. Beyond Jason, your work and maybe some of the work Richard's done on social. Talk to us a little bit about the marketing, or what you guys have done to date.
Yeah, we've seen. I could talk, primarily around some of the store marketing. My dad mentioned earlier about having a guy. We've got a guy in Lunds and Byerly's who's been a fantastic partner. The category manager there has been really great at getting us introduced and even supporting some of our promotional and marketing activities. So it's not something we've completely funded on our own. They've come to the table and tried to cultivate this new brand as well. And that's been great. And so we've run, we ran a what they call a Try It Tuesday promotion, where, it was a couple dollars off a jar, and that drove, that was about a 10x growth in jar sales for just that week.
Yeah.
I think they mentioned we were their number one salsa SKU for that week with that promotion, right? And so that was just flooding the market with new tastings, people trying it out for the first time, really pulling that price lever to get new product trials. This fall we're running a slightly different one, but still kind of trying to drive large amounts of trialing through a combination of price and placement and promotion. So we're going to have premium placement in the store on kind of a dedicated cap space. We're going to have a very attractive competitive price, in terms of a special. And then there's going to be, promotion activities as well in terms of printing and flyers, basically communicating the discount to in print. So we're trying to combine all the 4 Ps of marketing in this introduction into Lunds and Byerly's.
But I think it's fair to say it's been primarily targeted within the grocery store chain, right? Not a lot outside the chain.
Correct.
And I think we've part of it's what we're capable of doing. But I think, the industry still is a lot kind of what I call kind of old school sales and marketing, right? It's get in and build a relationship with the brand managers. Find those guys who want to help you and work with you, and they like your product and they're willing to provide some support, and then figure out how to try and drive it at that grocery store chain as much as you possibly can. And that's kind of where we've settled, and that's kind of been our plan. If there was a plan, that's kind of been our plan ever since the beginning, is let's get our foot in one store, figure out how to make it work, go to the next store, and we know who the next 2 or 3 grocery store chains are we would like to approach.
Very much a test and learn. Yep, try a few different strategies, see how they go, and if they work, we can keep pushing it.
Well, guys, we're 2020. This is when we're taping this right now. It's the 23rd of August, and as you heard Jeremy talk about, this thing launched, quote unquote, in 2020. You're in a super competitive space. I got to be honest, guys. I'm blown away by how fast you've been able to scale. That you've been able to get a foothold. Yeah.
Well, if I could add something, like, if I sit here and I listen to them talk, and there's a theme, no matter what industry you're in, it's all about a relationship. Selling and marketing is still the most powerful thing, is developing the relationship at the local level. Across all industries, for me, my opinion is it's a common thing. The biggest lesson is develop those local relationships, because that's where you're going to win.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we touched on this earlier, but the questions Jason was asking it's not how do we move our product, it's how do we help you sell more product,
right?
And how does a new supplier help you grow your that's mindset's important, I think.
It is
how do you get the customer to they need to benefit from it. Otherwise, there's nothing in it for them, and they won't help you.
Like building off of Rich's point too, if Jason wasn't physically in the market and able to go meet those people face to face and shake their hand and talk to them, I don't think we would have been successful. Like that was very critical to us getting our first grocery stores and actually being successful with it.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? Mark, Jeremy, Richard, and Jason, you all kind of talked about the relationship and the idea of, if there is a strategy, the strategy is let's get in, but not just get on the shelf. Once we're on the shelf, let's figure out a way that we can work collaboratively with that local store to make it worth their while. Because at the end of the day, getting on the shelf is, hooray, you're on the shelf. Well, that's, you had just said, Mark, earlier, how many new brands come out every single year. That's not to say just because you're not there forever. There might be another brand that comes on and communicates, hey, listen, store, we can help you drive sales. This is what our our investment's going to be. We've worked with some local beers too, and we've seen that too, where it's not getting on the shelf is half the battle. It's like, but once you're in, it's like
staying on the shelf. Staying on the shelf is the bigger battle.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was going to ask a question too. It's like, outside of marketing and advertising, the one thing I love is when we talk to businesses, I really do appreciate and I enjoy hearing the story. I mean, every big, small, middle, everyone's got a story. And every brand has a personality. And what I like about talking with companies like you is Pat and I are literally speaking with the face of the brand here. When we deal with larger companies, it's like sometimes it's so far removed. It's like, well, tell us about the personality of the brand. It's like, well, they can do that. But, I'm getting a sense of what you all are about. I've had a conversation with Richard. We chatted over a year ago, and Mark and Jeremy, we had a pre-production meeting, and Jason, I'm meeting you for the first time. If you could yes, you have to have a great product. I agree. But what is the personality of the brand? I don't know if you ever thought of it that way, but I'm going to put you on the spot. What is the personality?
I'm interested in this answer.
We've talked about it a lot, but I'm going to let one of the other two answer that question.
I think the personality of the brand is really about, quality homemade food that gives you a sense of belonging and the familial feel to it. This has always been something that's, as a family, right, as a big Hein family, has always kind of brought us together. And again, going back to the beginning of, what our first goal was, it was really to have a way to share it with our family and friends around the country. And that's still kind of the spirit that we're trying to convey, even as we continue to scale and grow. It's our kind of tagline is, from our kitchen to yours. And that's really what we're trying to do.
And I think, I fundamentally believe in doing business the right way. So all of the partners we're working with are, it's not I don't ever want it to be a confrontational relationship, right? Everybody's got to win.
Yep.
Otherwise nobody wins. So that's part of it. And then from the product company brand point of view, what we've always said is we're going to make the best quality product that has full flavor, people are going to enjoy. They want to have that food on their table. And if we can't do that, right, if we have to sacrifice quality or something in order to get to a certain cost point, we just won't do it, right? We'll figure out another way. And that's the other thing I think we've been really good about is when we run into the little hiccups that we've run into, the three of us figure it out. We'll get frustrated about it and we'll bounce around a few times. And Jason's fielded a few phone calls from me that are just me ranting for 20 minutes, but we usually work through whatever the issues are that we're come through.
Guys, talk to us about just the working relationship. And how do you guys run the business and by that I mean specifically, it's like, hey, every Wednesday at 5:00 at night, we're sitting down, we're having Zoom meetings. Is it just emails back and forth? Is it just like, how do the mechanics work?
kind of the same way that we started the business. There are no set meetings.
Love it.
There are no set phone calls. Everybody has a role. Everybody knows what their role is. They take care of their role. If they need help, they call. And, you know, when we run into the hiccups that we do run into, then we'll get everybody on the phone. But we're all working full time. We've all got other commitments that are going on. And so, you know, it's a Sunday evening at 8:00. Okay, we haven't talked to each other in 2 months. All three of us on a conference call. Let's get on the phone and kind of touch base on a couple things and make sure that we're all still aligned and everything's fine and right, we're taking care of what we need to take care of.
Guys, you talked about upcoming promotion and trying to maximize that for all it can be. What else do you have coming up? What else are you looking at down the road? Like, what are some of the next steps for the Hein family?
I think the next big steps are, we think we've at least gotten we're going to run this promotion in September. We think we're on a good path with Lunds and Byerly's. We've been at Kowalski's now for a little over a year and a half. It's time to figure out who the next one or two chains are for us to get in. And that's what we're trying to figure out now. We have some people we'd like to get into. And so we're going to, you know, Jason and I are starting to reach out and try and have those conversations and see if we can get them, you know, put us on the shelf and let us work through the process that we've been working through. So that's the next big step.
Guys, I'd like to hear, as we kind of approach the end of this, what were some of the biggest surprises for each one of you? And that could be good or that could be bad too. I'd just like to get your takes on that, because I'm sure Mark, yours is going to be a little different from Jason and Jeremy's, but what are some of the surprises?
So Jeremy, you go first.
There's been a lot. I think for me, the biggest surprise actually has just been how fast we've been able to grow and how much we've accomplished in such a short period of time. If I look back 2 years ago when we started, I wouldn't have thought that we were sitting here today with our product on 42 different grocery shelves and looking to expand next year and hopefully double that. There's been a lot of challenges and a lot of lessons that we've learned along the way, but I think for me, that's the biggest surprise.
Chase.
It kind of came up a little bit earlier. I was surprised at how easy it was to actually get on the grocery store shelf. And I was surprised at how hard it is to actually get traction once you get on a grocery store shelf. And probably equally surprised at things that I thought were going to be relatively smooth and easygoing, like supply chain was with COVID and all the things that we ran into during this period of time. That was actually some of the hardest pieces, I think.
So for me, it's similar to Jeremy's. I told him when we started this, if we ever sold $5,000 worth of salsa, I'd think it was a success. I think we're on track to
10x that.
More than 10x that number this year. So that's been a bit of a surprise. I come at that question a little bit differently because when we've needed something, just pick it, co-packer, distribution, something. I've had a lot of examples where it's kind of fallen in my lap just when I need it. And so a perfect example was I was having to figure out, okay, I'm shipping 50 cases of salsa a day out of my house. I'm packing them by hand. I'm shipping them by UPS. I can't do this any longer. I need a shipping company that I can work with. An email shows up in my inbox the very next day with a service that is just absolutely perfect for what we needed, right? So there's been some of those kinds of things that have just, when you need it, it's there and it works out. So
Guys, this is business is moving in the right direction. Congratulations. Kurt and I both had the product. It's outstanding. We continue to wish you well in all of your efforts. Guys, are there plans for something beyond salsa? Have you guys started that conversation yet? Like, I don't know what, but
so probably not new products beyond salsa. Where we really want to go is all of us kind of have a little more, I would say, more expertise in the manufacturing production side of things. And so we would really like to have our own kitchen in place, right? So instead of using a co-packer, we'd rather have our own kitchen and do some of that. And I think I alluded to when we talked earlier, I do a lot of farmers markets down here in Houston, and there are a lot of vendors who are trying to do the same thing we're trying to do, and they're struggling with a lot of the things that we've talked about today. And I know that if we had our own kitchen in place, I could help 5 or 6 of the companies that are trying to grow their business in the same farmers market I go to get to that next level. And they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the expertise that I think the 3 of us can bring that would allow them to grow. So that's what my vision is for where we want to go next.
Hein family, thank you very much for being on the pod. Everybody who's out there, we're going to be working on some stuff, but Marc, you've got the final word. Tell us anything you want about how to get in touch with you, how to get the product, where to go. This time is yours, so please use it.
Right. Thanks, Patrick. And thanks for having us. I really appreciate the opportunity. We, as we said on the thing, our goal is to provide really good quality products that people enjoy, and we continue to try and do that. You can find us at HeinFamilyKitchen.com. We will ship it anywhere in the country. You can also, if you're in Minneapolis, you can find it at Baker's Deli in Victoria. You can find it at Kowalski's. You can find it at Lunds and Byerly's. If you're in La Crosse, Wisconsin, you can find it at People's Co-op. And you can always call me, right? So my number's readily available. So it's 630-414-7633 if you're interested in talking about salsa.
That's awesome. And we'll put all that information in the show notes. Hein family, thank you so much for being on the pod.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you again.